Whether they say it or not, what you are taught generally in the world is that Europe is the center of the world. That's not by accident. Europe basically controlled the majority of the world for the past 400 years. That only ended in the 50s and the 60s. We're going to talk about that, right? So, you had this idea of Europe having power, and that leads to Eurocentrism. Now, just like that window has a frame, this talk has a frame. And I want you to think about everything I say within this framework, right? I'm not talking about people being mean and having bad spirits. I'm talking about the power they wield because of the control they have. In 2014, we think racism is, I don't like Mexicans because whatever, or I don't like dark-skinned people. It's not about just not liking people. It's about over centuries getting social power to control institutions, money, media, perception. That's what I'm talking about. So I know people catch feelings when we talk about race and racism, but it's the only way we're going to learn about these issues. And I'm talking about power, not about being mean or people having mean spirits. It's not about that. Who is this?
Zeus.
I hear a lot of Zeus. I'm surprised y'all know who he is. That's good, that's good. Who else though? Zeus is what? A God. You can be raised with Black Jesus from the age of 1. Most people in America, when they hear God, they think something like this. Because this image is so dominant in the media. This was painted on what's called the Sistine Chapel in Italy by a dude named Michelangelo. Not the Ninja Turtle, who he was named as. It's a painting, right? I photoshopped this image right here. I don't know if you can really see it. But when Michelangelo painted this, this was a dominant image of Jesus. So it's kind of like more like what he actually looked like. Dark features, almost like dreaded hair, very, very dark. They told him, you have to paint these figures on our church and they have to be white. He said, I don't know what that looks like because we have no models for a white Jesus. White apostles, because they were Palestinian, they were brown, right? But the power of the church made this the dominant symbol of God and Jesus and divinity in general, right? So we're talking about power here. We're talking about images that control what we think of the world. Standards of beauty. This is what's called a Venus. Have y'all heard that term before? Venus. She comes from Greece, the same place Zeus comes from. She is the symbol of beauty and fertility. Who is this? Virgin Mary, right? So this was 500 years before this. This is before Christ. But take a look how similar they look, right? Across time, this becomes the dominant standards of beauty. Look at her hair. Long flowing hair. You can see it here too. Blue eyes, soft features, not aggressive, not scary. What music do you hear when you look at her? Opera. You know, harps playing, stuff like that, right? So even without hearing music, you can associate ideas just off that image. How does that relate to the play? Who's that? Vanessa, right? You got Vanessa, and that's Asagai giving her the Nigerian cloak. So Asagai thinks this is beautiful. However, who is this? Not Walter Lee, it's the other guy. Who is it? George Murchison. What does George say when he sees her wrapped in this? Don't look good. I'm taking you to the theater. I didn't think we were going to be in the theater. I thought we were going to it, right? So there's something about this image of African dress that's threatening to George, right? George makes an allusion, a reference, if you will, to Greek mythology. He's learning it in school. We know it. He says it. A dude named Prometheus. Talk about him later. So we know he's being taught about her, Venus. That's where she comes from, Greece. So we know he is taking this in, being taught this is the standard of beauty. The hair, the features. Maybe that explains why he doesn't find this very attractive. Right? So now we're starting to make sense, right? But does that really make sense? Right? Most people would say if you take her to the theater, there's no problem with that. I mean, most people would say you got it pretty good. She's very attractive, light skin, long hair. And this isn't seen as threatening, it's usually seen as exotic, right? She's Indian. But if you take her to the theater, people are going to be like, why is everything so African? Like, why she got the head wrap on? Like, what she thinks she's doing, right? What's the difference? They're both cultural, they're both essentially the same.
One black and one white.
One's black and one is not. I know a lot of people in here think she looks good, but why she look good though? What does she look like?
It's like Kim Kardashian.
Oh, what's good? She looks like this, right? And that's what we're taught is good, right? That's what culturally we're taught looks good, right? It's not about a conspiracy. It's not like the man is in the room somewhere plotting the images to show people. This is just what the culture produces, right? So what do y'all think about this dude?
Ugly.
Real, like keeping it real, that's fine. Y'all ever heard this term before, heart of darkness? This is the term people use in relation to Africa a lot. Darkness, dark, scary, right? But let me tell you who this dude really is. He's from a country called Kenya. That's a country that's referred to in the play. In 1950s, Kenya did not have its independence. It was run by Europeans, specifically the English. He was in Kenya, and he was part of a group that said, I need to run my own country, because the British were exploiting the people. They were taking the money, they were controlling the institutions, they were violent. In fact, the British courts gave the Kenyans a multi-million-dollar settlement to say, we're sorry for all the torture we did to the Kenyans. So they have a legal precedent to say they were being tortured in this country. What he did in the 50s was join a group that's loosely called the Maoists. They are a group that fought against the people from Europe that controlled the country of Kenya. When he was fighting in the bush, he didn't have time to do his hair. So this is where the term dreadlocks come from, because the hair locked up when they were fighting in the bush, fighting to free their families, to stop the torture. And they wear this as a source of pride. This is 2005, he keeps the locks. It's not ugly in his conception, it's a remembering the fact that he was committed to fighting the people who were attacking him, right? So again, we're talking about culture, and we're talking about how we as an American culture don't understand what this means and how beautiful this is to people in Kenya. It's literally what gave them life as a country. So how does that change how we think about this dude who's given his life for liberation, right? And what does that mean to play? Y'all remember this scene? When Walter Lee was jumping up dancing on the table? What were they saying? They were saying, Awaragustie! And what else were they saying? They were saying, go flaming spear.
Oh, come on, go, CA! Flaming spear!
Listen, my black brothers.
Oh, come on, go, CA!
Do you hear the waters rushing against the shores of our coastline?
Oh, come on, go, CA!
Do you hear the screeching of the cocks in yonder hills beyond where our chiefs meet in council for the coming of the mighty war?
Oh, come on, go, CA!
Do you hear the beating of the wings of the birds as they fly low over our mountains and the low places of our land?
Oh, come on, go,
Do
CA!
you hear the singing of the women, singing the sweet war songs? Oh, do you hear, my black brothers?
We hear you, flaming spear!
Telling us to prepare for the greatness of the times. Black brother. Like brother hell.
Where did that word come from? Did he just make it up because he was drunk? Does it have any meaning? Alright, this dude is not a character. He's in your book though. His name is in your books. I'll give literally my last dollar. I'm giving my last dollar to anyone who can name who this dude is. You cannot, he's in your book. His name is Jomo Kenyatta. He's the leader of the resistance in Kenya. What was his name in the bush? Flaming Spear. He didn't just make it up. That was the name of the leader of the rebellion in Kenya. This is 1960. He is fighting a rebellion at the time this book was written. So Walter knows who he is. Did y'all see when he was the chauffeur, he had the newspapers in his hand. He reads the newspaper. He knows who Kenyatta is. So when he jumps on the table, you could read that as him being drunk and goofing off and having no meaning, right? But if you know who Kenyatta is, you have to read that scene totally differently, right? He's talking about the inspiration of the African drums. He's talking about wanting that to be part of him and wanting to connect to that, right? When you see this play, today, a lot of people play it that way. This was the play they put on at the Everyman Theater. You may have seen it downtown. I watched it, And the way they directed that scene, that was the only way you could interpret it. He was drunk, he was goofing off, he was a drunk black man. That was a director's decision to play that scene that way. When you watch Sidney Poitier do it, it's something very, very different. I would argue that that's an example of Eurocentrism. We don't know who Kenyatta is. We don't know what that scene means. The only way it makes sense to us is that he's goofing off. But I would argue that him being drunk allows him to say things he can't say sober, that he can't say in front of his boss, because it's literally a war going on. And Kenyatta's courage is what's inspiring him to fight. He's trying to connect to it. So it's very, very different, very important. It's not funny at all, right? If you read it that way. That's what this is about, how you read what seems to be obvious things. He's obviously drunk. He's obviously goofing off. There's way more to it than that. And that's where the history and the culture comes in. You cannot understand this scene without knowing who the Flaming Spear is. And you can't understand Walter without knowing about Jomo Kenyatta. So why don't we understand this? What's going on, right? This is the last thing. Eurocentric translations, right? Just a term, don't focus on it. Just focus on this dude. His name is Prometheus, right? That sound familiar? Prometheus? It's in your book. George Murchison, before he leaves, remember Walter's talking to him about all his big ideas? He says, all right, catch you later, Prometheus.
What are you learning down there? What are they filling your head with? Eh? Sociology? Psychology? They teaching you how to be a man? How to take over and run this world, boy? Huh? How to run a rubber plantation or a steel mill or something? No. Just how to read books and talk proper. Yes, and wear faggoty white shoes.
Come along, George.
A nice time now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Prometheus. Who's Prometheus?
He's throwing shade. That's what that is. He's trying to pack him up. Because he knows he's not smart enough to know this is a Greek god. This is a Greek demigod who brought the light of knowledge, the fire of knowledge from the gods to the people. And he was punished for it. So he was like, you think you're so smart, you're just like Prometheus, but you don't even know who that is, so you ain't so smart. That was his whole pack, right? But Lorraine Hansberry is very intelligent. There's what's called symbolism going on here. Think of this symbol. Fire. The fire of knowledge from Europe versus the fire of freedom from Africa. That's not accidental. These are two competing ideas. That's Eurocentrism and Afrocentrism competing against each other. And that's how you have to read these two ideas. So let's unpack this a little bit. The fire of knowledge, of Eurocentric knowledge. You ever heard of this phrase, I think, therefore I am? I think, therefore I am. René Descartes, famous European philosopher. Long story, won't get into it. Point is, this was radical, just to say that. Because back in the day, it wasn't about you, it was about God. And it was about the king. To just say it's about me was a radical thought for Europeans. But it's very individualistic. I'm taking myself into existence. It's all about me. What does that mean for this book? So if you can see, the world is changing in 1959 when this is written. This is a picture of the slums of Chicago in 1950. This is literally where Walter lived. This is a picture of Evanston, the suburbs of Chicago in 1960. This is literally where his boss lives. So back in segregation days, it was very hard, a lot of poverty, but you were all poor together. And you were all struggling together, and you didn't even know about this. So you didn't feel inferior to this, because all you knew was this. Which created a different psychology for the people experiencing that, right? So again, what we're seeing, the world is changing in 59. You're starting to have to work in the white world. You're seeing all the wealth they have, and you feel inferior because you've internalized this idea of the individual. The I think, therefore I am, the individual ideal, right? So I think, therefore I am, becomes I think, therefore I am inferior, right? That little phrase explains a lot of the psychological struggle Walter's going through. Think about this. Black market, 1930s. You could be dirty and dusty, but you would be seen as positive in the community because you brought food to the people. Remember, grandma said, I hate the supermarket. Why? Because she's used to this community. This is, I don't have it this month, can you spot me some credit? And your black brother or sister being like, yeah, I can do that. This is an all-cash economy. This is seeing all the food that you can't afford to buy. And this is only knowing this and not knowing any of this means that you see yourself as inferior because you don't match up to this, being able to buy with money. That connection to community was severed as the world began to integrate. As you only worked for a wage and you couldn't grow your food yourself because you were living in the city. Came up from the South, right? So what does that do to you to see this, to have this psychologically be beating down on you all the time?
Yes, my raps are filled with rage.
One of these days, we gotta bust back for the homies.
You have to be logical. You know, if I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocking on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the party, let me see like them throwing salami all over I mean, just like throwing food around. But they're telling me there's no food in here. You know what I'm saying? Every day. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is going to change to, we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, you know, give me all the food, breaking out the door. And after a year, you just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, you know, with civil rights movement. We was asking, you know, now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're gonna do? Ask?
I put my gun away and grab my AK.
I mean, I think that's Walter Lee Younger in a minute, right? That's what he is experiencing in the world, right? So think about it. He's being eaten away by being able to see all the wealth. Prometheus' punishment was to be eaten by an eagle for eternity. And when they talk about Walter Lee, what did they say? Walter Lee, what's eating at you? Something that's gobbling you up. She's very smart. Lorraine Hansberry did not do this by accident. And it's that feeling of separation and inferiority that's eating Walter Lee alive. Last thing, how does he survive? Real quick. The phrase I gave you, I think therefore I am, comes out of Europe. This is an African thing. It's almost the exact opposite. I am because we are. What saves Walter Lee at the end from selling the house? It's his love for his family, and that gives him a sense of self, a self-confidence that he can survive. It's that cultural connection, that group unity, that has been a critical part of many people of color, including African people, for their entire century. It's a different culture of how you understand your self-worth, not the individual, but the collective. Afrocentrism versus Eurocentrism. And that's the conflict that's happening in Raisin.